Our next speaker comes from New Mexico, and she will be speaking about a very important topic that affects you on a daily basis. And that topic is our food. Soy products are ever present in so much of what's out there in our food supply. Is it good? Is it bad? And why? You want and need to know more than you probably realize. And this nutritionist has been an expert, he's been a journalist, doing a lot of work in this area and written a book on the subject as well. Please give a warm hand of welcome to Kaayla Daniel.
I come to you with shocking news. Soy is not a health food. Soy does not prevent disease. Soy does not cure disease. And soy has not even been proven safe. Now, if that seems unnecessarily alarmist, it's not just me. The Israeli Health Ministry, the French Food Agency, and the German Institute of Risk Assessment have all issued warnings to their citizens about soy. But in this country, guess what? Our FDA still allows a soy prevents heart disease health claim. But remember, that's the same FDA that's given us Vioxx and aspartame, the same FDA that's in bed with big business. But because of this FDA-approved health claim, the average person, as well as a whole lot of doctors and other health practitioners, still think soy is a miracle food. They think it's a miracle food that can cure everything from heart disease to cancer to ingrown toenails. But all this is changing, and it's not just because of freedom fighters like us. In January 2006, the American Heart Association announced in its journal Circulation that soy does not lower cholesterol and soy does not prevent heart disease, and therefore an FDA-approved health claim is not warranted. And the truth is, soy is not a good marker, cholesterol is not a good marker of heart disease anyway. But be that as it may, it's illegal for the FDA to allow a health claim for soy if there's no consensus in the scientific community. But the AHA, the American Heart Association, they found no scientific agreement, and that's why they made their statement. Now, last year, the Weston A. Price Foundation submitted a petition to the FDA asking for retraction of that soy prevents heart disease health claim. It is now being considered by the FDA. The petition was signed by leading scientists, including Dr. Mary Enig, who back in the late 1970s exposed some of the dangers of trans fatty acids. It was also signed by Dr. Galen Knight, who is one of our speakers today, and by Dr. Kilmer McCulley, father of the homocysteine theory of heart disease. Now, the FDA's soy prevents heart disease health claim is based on the idea that soy lowers total and LDL cholesterol. Now, the first issue we raised in that petition is we reviewed the literature and found that soy sometimes lowers cholesterol, sometimes raises cholesterol, sometimes has no effect at all. Does that strike you as an agreement? The second issue we raised in our petition is that most studies on soy and cholesterol are deeply flawed because of the routine use of casein as a control. Casein is a fractionated milk protein product that is high in the amino acid methionine but seriously deficient in cysteine. Now, what does that mean? Well, research at the Shizuoka University in Japan has shown that compared to other proteins, casein will significantly raise total cholesterol levels and lower HDL levels. So what does this mean if you're a soy industry paid scientist who would like to show that soy will lower cholesterol. What are you going to use as your control? You're going to use casein because the likelihood is very strong that soy will come out looking good the way you want it. Now, the third issue in the petition we submitted was that to date, the most accepted explanation for why soy would lower cholesterol in the cases where it actually lowers cholesterol is that it stimulates LDL receptor activity. The problem with this is it increases the excretion of bile acids, and that can lead to losses of fat-soluble vitamins as well as the loss of thyroid and steroid hormones. Increased bile acid production also seriously compromises levels of vitalethine. Vitalethine is an endogenous regulator of key metabolic pathways, and in plain English, we need it. Without that, the body's immune system is fried, and with that, the ability to fight cancers. So the obvious conclusion here is that if soy actually does lower cholesterol, that it would do so at a steep price. The fourth issue is soy actually can increase the incidences of some types of heart disease, specifically cardiomyopathy, which is a form of heart disease that is on the rise. It occurs to 1 out of 500 Americans. And it's the leading cause of death in young athletes. So you hear about a 20-year-old basketball player dropping dead on the court, probably cardiomyopathy. Soy also will increase heart arrhythmias. Okay, fifth issue. When the FDA approved the health claim, it did not consider that soy protein has a negative effect on homocysteine levels. And in fact, it can increase homocysteine levels. And the simplest explanation is that soy is a plant protein that is completely missing vitamin B12. Dr. Kilmer McCulley, who has written dozens of scientific papers in very, very prestigious journals and also a couple best-selling books, has come up with what can prevent heart disease, including taking B6, B12, and folic acid, 3 very inexpensive vitamins, and compare that to statin drugs and all the theories of heart disease, such as C-reactive protein, cholesterol, etc., where the solution is these expensive statin drugs. So soy can raise homocysteine levels. B12 is part of it. The other part would have to do to the amino acid cysteine. Now, if we look at United States Department of Agriculture tables, we find that soybeans are actually very high in cysteine. But there's a problem. The cysteine in soybeans is tied up in something called protease inhibitors. Protease inhibitors inhibit protease. Protease is the enzyme you need to digest protein. So soy is a plant protein that has a high level of protein, but guess what? It comes with something that makes it hard to digest. That's one of the reasons soy is indigestible to many people. So we have those protease inhibitors. And because the cysteine is not bioavailable, the body ends up producing more homocysteine. And high homocysteine levels not only put us at greater risk for heart disease, but for premature aging, cancer, and other health problems. If you'd like to read our petition, go to the Weston A. Price Foundation website, and I will be here until about 4 o'clock today, Weston Price table, New Trends table, and I can get you to that website. You can also read on the Weston Price website 2 petitions that I wrote in 2005 and we submitted to the FDA, which had to do with protesting the idea of a soy prevents cancer health claim. The soy industry was real pleased with what had happened to soy sales after the heart claim, and they wanted to have the idea that soy prevents cancer on the label of every single food in the supermarkets, basically, and in the health food stores. And they predicted that if they succeeded in getting that FDA-approved health claim regarding soy and cancer, that they would increase the sales of soy protein in this country from 4 billion a year to 8 billion. Well, we stopped that health claim. We stopped it. So you might say I've cost the soy industry $4 billion to date. Yeah. So let's move on to look at some of the information you need to decide whether you actually want to include soy in your diet and soy in your life. Well, there are a lot of problems with soy. I already mentioned the protease inhibitors, which make it very hard to digest and can lead to pancreatic problems and digestion problems. There are also phytates that make it hard to properly absorb minerals, and that's going to affect your bones, among other things. Soybeans also contain high levels of oligosaccharides, which is why soy can produce a lot of gas. And indeed, the soy industry studies, they have indicated that they see a couple problems in getting all of us consumers to eat lots of soy. The one problem was the taste problem, and the second one was one that they call the flatulence problem. And soy is indeed the king of musical fruits. But there is a more serious problem with soy than gas. And the most serious problem with soy is the phytoestrogens. Phyto means plant, and soy is full of plant estrogens. Plant estrogens are not true estrogens. They're not identical to human estrogens, but they're close enough so they can fool the body. And with that, they can create a lot of hormonal havoc, a lot of endocrine disruption, and in short, a whole lot of problems. Thyroid, reproductive, you name it. These are serious problems. Now, soy protein contains a type of phytoestrogens known as isoflavones. You may have heard that, or you may have heard of things like genistein and daidzein, which are types of isoflavones. That's what we're talking about here. So plant estrogens exert estrogenic effects either directly or indirectly. Now, directly they do that because they bind with hormone receptor sites. So what do you think that means if you've got a little boy who needs testosterone to grow into a man and it's all gummed up with soy estrogens? Okay, let's look at indirect. The indirect way it affects hormones is interfering with estrogen, testosterone, and other hormone production. Now, there are a lot of uncertainties about plant phytoestrogens. But one thing is clear. Soy plant estrogens are not weak. Yet the soy industry and the popular health writers constantly tell us that soy estrogens are safe because they are weak estrogens. You know, weak, all-natural soy estrogens. And they're being pushed as hormone replacement therapy, etc. And in terms of numbers, the popular media and soy industry scientists will tell us that they are 10,000 times to 1 million times less potent than the human estrogen estradiol. The correct figure, however, is 1,200 times less potent. And this figure was agreed upon by a lot of very good scientists after looking at all the research, and they met at the 3rd International Conference on Phytoestrogens in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1995. And they came up with that figure 1,200 times weaker. Now that might seem weak, wouldn't it? I mean, that sounds weak to me. But the thing is, if the quantity is high enough, and the quantity does get high if your baby's going to be fed soy formula, or your child's drinking a lot of soy milk, or you're drinking a lot of soy milk and eating soy energy bars and snacking on whole bags of edamame or whatever, the quantity adds up, and that is where it becomes dangerous. So, how did the myth of soy having weak estrogens emerge? Where did that come from? I think this group is going to find this story very interesting. Anthony Huggett, a PhD scientist with Nestle in Switzerland, made an error involving a decimal point, the kind of thing that my 5th grader is working with right now. The decimal point, the figure he meant to write was 1 over 1,000, or 0.001. What he wrote instead is 0.0001. So 1/1,000th became 1/10,000th. Now, this was pointed out to Dr. Huggett by a number of very good scientists, but nothing happened. The error lived on. Nestle forwarded the report, complete with the error, to the World Health Organization, and that passed it around in turn to the New Zealand Health Ministry and other governments. Now, whether that erroneous figure was a deliberate attempt to deceive or a simple negligence or incompetence is not known. But what I can tell you is Nestle is a major manufacturer of soy infant formula. And so is Wyeth Ayers and some of these other companies that have been very busy in promoting the idea of the weak estrogen and saying it's 1/10,000 to 1,000,000 times as weak. So what else do we need to look at if we're thinking of using soy to promote our health? Well, if we're going to be playing around with estrogens, plant estrogens or any estrogens, we need to think about things like timing. And that has to do with sure knowledge of windows of either opportunity, as the soy industry would put it, or vulnerability, as I would put it. And these times would include during pregnancy, during infancy, during puberty, during pregnancy, during the reproductive years, and in women during menopause. All the times when hormones are really fluctuating and changing, that's when soy is likely to have the most serious effects. Now, to understand some of what can be going on here, I'm going to point out 3 key roles of phytoestrogens, all of which have a potential for good or for evil. The first is as proestrogens. Proestrogens might possibly benefit menopausal women, but they could contribute to cancer, particularly breast cancer. The second way those soy estrogens can operate is as anti-estrogens. That could help estrogen-dependent cancers, but it would contribute to infertility. And the third way the estrogens in soy could operate is as developmental toxins. Now, during pregnancy or during the baby's first few months, that could disrupt sexual differentiation. I'm going to talk more about that in a bit, but it might possibly later on, as used by children and adults, possibly protect against environmental estrogens, things in the plastics and pesticides, etc. Now, at this point, I see you all shaking your heads. Didn't I say proestrogens? Didn't I say anti-estrogen? What's going on here? Well, this is part of the problem. And this is why some people will say they've eaten a whole lot of soy and it helps them with their hot flashes or whatever, and other people experience harm right away. They operate differently on different people at different times. And my feeling about this whole subject is that the risks far outweigh the benefits. And people mostly should eliminate soy from the diet. But there might be some of you who are intrigued with the idea of using soy as a nutraceutical or a pharmaceutical drug. Well, if you're thinking about doing that, we do need to be looking at dosing and monitoring, just like with any other pharmaceutical. And with soy, that is easier said than done. For example, let's look at how many isoflavones you might find in a given carton of soy milk or in a soy energy bar or a bag of edamame. Well, we don't know. That's the biggest problem, because the levels in soybeans are influenced by many factors, including crop year, geographical location, the number of daylight hours, the temperature, humidity, rainfall, fertilizers, the type of pathogens that year, and the way the plant actually responds to attack or disease. All those things will affect the level of isoflavones. And on top of that, American varieties of soybeans have significantly higher total isoflavone content than Asian versions of soybeans. So what do you think that means to all those studies done, say, in Asia compared to what we're eating here in the United States? There's also different forms of those isoflavones. There's also the issue of something called equol, which is an estrogenically active metabolite of the type of isoflavone known as daidzein. And the important point about that to tell you is that some of you are equol producers and some of you are not, and we don't know who's who. And if you are an equol producer, you're probably somebody who eats a whole lot more carbohydrates, but beyond that we don't completely know. But if you are an equol producer, you're going to be reacting to soy differently than if you are not an equol producer. So is anyone starting to see why soy could be a very difficult pharmaceutical or nutraceutical or just food to work with in terms of your health? Let's look at some of the windows of opportunity, or maybe we should say windows of vulnerability. Starts with during pregnancy. What happens if a mom-to-be is eating a lot of soy? From the outset, a fetus is genetically male or female. However, all mammalian fetuses develop into phenotypic females unless the male hormones are there. When all goes well with the boy fetus, testosterone is produced in his testes, even during the first trimester of pregnancy, even during that time when a mom-to-be might not even know she's pregnant. That little male fetus is producing testosterone. Now, what do you think happens if estrogens, whether environmental estrogens or soy estrogens, start interfering with and suppressing that baby boy's testosterone production? The male fetus is extremely vulnerable at this point, and this is why birth defects involving sex organs are more than 8 times more likely to happen to males than to females. Right now we are experiencing an epidemic of a birth defect in male babies called hypospadias. Hypospadias is a birth defect in which the tip of the penis is the mouth of the penis is not at the end but somewhere underneath. And when it happens, it's to a very estrogenized little boy. And some of them undergo operations. It can be a very serious problem, and the levels from minor to major surgery being involved. There is also possible other damage to the baby boy's reproductive system, and that may not be so obvious at birth. It may not show up until puberty or later. It may also be changes to the brain, specifically the sexually dimorphic brain. Unfortunately, we do not have a whole lot of human studies at this point, but we do have plenty of animal studies. And I get plenty tired of hearing vegans saying that these are totally irrelevant because we're not dogs and cats and pigs and quail or whatever. But what I always say about that is, yes, that's completely true, but if you're seeing adverse effects in every one of these species, don't you think we as human mammals might also be affected? So what about our little baby girls? How are they affected if mom eats soy in pregnancy? The thing about the baby girls is that even if mom eats a whole lot of soy in pregnancy, genital development in the female fetus is largely independent of hormonal interaction. However, plant estrogen exposure could program a little girl for early breast development, precocious puberty, and even estrogen-dependent cancers, including breast cancers. How has the soy industry responded to this? They say soy can only benefit babies in the womb. Kaayla Martiniere, a PhD at the University of Alabama, has proposed that the key to preventing breast cancer is giving shots of soy genistein to fetuses in the womb. You heard that right. Shots of genistein to fetuses in the womb. Now, why would he be suggesting that? The idea is that he can inject the Asian blueprint into our babies. I mean, do you believe that? So far, Dr. Lamartiniere has only experimented on rats with the result that he's achieved, quote, enhanced mammary gland maturation and accelerated uterine weight gain. In plain English, what does that mean? Premature breast development and premature puberty. Now, to speak accurately about this, his studies did show that those early sprouting breasts have fewer terminal end buds and more lobular changes that might indicate greater differentiation, which could mean a decreased susceptibility later on to breast cancer. My answer to that is, please, let's use some common sense. Should we subject our unborn baby girls to a treatment that leads to early puberty? Not my daughter. Another thing, this whole theory is based on the idea that soy is the reason that Asians have lower rates of breast cancer. Soy is also credited with lower rates of prostate cancer and lower rates of colon cancer. And that is true. Asians have lower rates of breast, prostate, and colon cancer. But what the soy industry never mentions is that Asians have higher rates of liver, esophageal, stomach, pancreatic, and thyroid cancers. Now, my opinion about all of this is that Asian is a huge continent. There are many different diets, many lifestyles. There are many factors, and I don't think we can credit soy or blame soy for these differences in terms of cancer incidence. And we need to also think about how much soy Asians really eat. You listen to the soy industry, you think those Asians are guzzling soy milk all day and they're eating soy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. But the truth is Asians, wherever we go in Asia, from places in China where they eat almost nothing to Japan where they're eating more, soy is it's still used as a condiment in the diet, not as a staple food. The other thing is they're eating different forms of soy foods than the big soy industry is promoting. They're eating things like miso soup. They're eating natto. They're eating tempeh in Indonesia. They're eating tofu, which is not quite as good as those other foods, but they're eating small quantities of it. It's also a myth that Asians eat soy everywhere. In fact, the soy industry considers Asia as a huge untapped market for their products. DuPont is moving big factories into China and other parts of Asia. They're busy marketing soy as they're marketing soy as the natural heritage. And of course, they're promoting this natural heritage straight from America. And the types of soy foods would include textured vegetable protein, soy protein isolates, soy protein concentrate, all these modern soy foods that came in after World War II and that have nothing to do with anything that was ever traditional in Asia. And for that matter, soy milk is not a traditional food in Asia. How do you think that became popular? It started in the 1930s. Seventh-day Adventist missionaries from America started promoting soy milk. Now, the industry knows that perfectly well, but they're nonetheless promoting lots of soy foods as the way Asians really eat. Okay, let's move on to another critical area of opportunity, which would be soy during infancy. This is the whole huge soy infant formula issue. More and more babies in the United States are now getting soy formula. And the babies are at great risk for 3 reasons. When they're on soy formula, that's all they're eating. It's the main source of nutrition. The second thing is babies are very small in size and they are at a key developmental stage. Right after birth is a crucial time for the programming of the infant to grow up. And let's start with boy babies. Boy babies in the first month of life experience a testosterone rush. And those little baby boys actually have as much testosterone as a grown man. Now that might seem hard to believe, but go check out the textbooks and you'll find that's true. And the testosterone at such a tender age, what that does is it helps program the baby boy so he will go through puberty later and become a man. Now I want to be clear here, risk is not the same as certainty. The problems do not happen to all boys, and there's a great amount of variability in the extent of the problems. Some boys are affected very severely and others in more minor ways. But the fact is that now that soy formula sales have been escalating for 30 years, we're seeing more and more parents and pediatricians reporting higher numbers of boys whose physical maturation is either delayed or in the worst cases not happening at all. We're hearing about boys who have breasts, who have underdeveloped gonads, undescended testicles, steroid insufficiencies, and then when they're trying to father children, we're finding boys with poor quality of sperm and a lower quantity of sperm. And because of these problems, the Israeli Health Ministry, the French Food Agency, and the German Institute of Risk Assessment have said very clearly we should not be using soy formula except as a last resort. And lactose intolerance is not a good enough reason. There's many, many alternatives, and they should all be tried first. And in addition to those three governments, we have the Swiss Federal Health Service, the Australian New Zealand Food Agency, the British Committee on Toxicity, and the British Dietetic Association. They've all been very clear. Babies should not get soy formula. So what about what's going to happen to a girl that's on soy formula? Well, that little girl baby is probably overly estrogenized, and that could lead to premature breast development, premature puberty, fertility problems later on, menstrual problems, and increased risk of breast cancer. Now, we have an epidemic of premature puberty among our little girls in this country. And I want to be very clear, soy is not the other problem, the only problem. We have a lot of environmental estrogens, pesticides, supermarket meats, plastics. There are a lot of problems, but soy is definitely part of this picture. And in some ways, it's the one we can control the most. By age 8, 14.7% of Caucasian girls are going through puberty. But 48.3% of African American girls are going through puberty. 48% for the African American girls. And the thing is, this is not a racial characteristic. We have plenty of studies showing that, say, in the 1940s, all these girls were going through puberty around the same time. So why are so many African American girls going through puberty early? I think a big part of that is soy formula is more likely to be given to these girls because of presumed lactose intolerance. And that would include things like the Women, Infant, and Children program, government programs. They often give soy formula to black children, also Native American children, babies. So I've mentioned some of the reproductive problems that can happen to these babies on soy formula. And that's just the beginning. There's all sorts of other problems. They are at higher risk, for example, to thyroid disorders, particularly autoimmune thyroid disease. Allergies. Soy is now one of the top 8 allergens. That's widely acknowledged. It's up from around top 10, top 11, 15 years ago. And many experts believe soy allergies will soon be in the top 4, and a big reason for that is the increase in genetically modified soybeans in the marketplace. That's probably the biggest reason for the increase in soy allergies. Plus the fact soy is in just about everything, so the exposure is greater, and the other thing, soy formula is more popular. Now somebody might be thinking now, but wasn't soy formula tested thoroughly before the FDA approved it for the marketplace? Well, yeah. Of course it was tested, but they only were looking for obvious things like height and weight. If the baby was fat enough and tall enough at the right age, they assumed that it was perfectly good. The problem with that is the problems with soy formula often do not show up until puberty. And because of that delay, a lot of people aren't making the cause and effect connection. That's one of the biggest problems we've been dealing with all along. So somebody is probably thinking, but hasn't been soy formula, hasn't that been used in Asia for thousands of years? The answer is no. Soy formula was invented in Baltimore. It was invented in 1909 by an American pediatrician, and he had the best motives, of course, to save babies, and soy formula became popular in Asia because of the promotion from Seventh-day Adventist missionaries. So let's move on to the next window of opportunity, and that would be the reproductive years. Herbalists, witches, and midwives have known for thousands of years that certain foods and certain herbs have a contraceptive effect. And soy is the food that is most commonly eaten that has that effect. And scientists began to identify the components responsible in the 1920s. Now, how has the soy industry responded to this? Well, they claim that the adverse effects on fertility are actually beneficial. Imagine that. And they're claiming that the same effects that can cause infertility are actually beneficial because they'll prevent breast cancer. Well, let me tell you how this came about. And we find this repeated all the time. Soy will prevent breast cancer. The spin first came out in 1994 in a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The lead author was Adine Cassidy, and she worked with a small group of women, and they were fed textured vegetable protein at the rate of 45 milligrams isoflavones per day. Within 1 month, how long? 1 month. Longer menstrual cycles, changes in luteinizing hormone, changes in follicle stimulating hormone, and these changes were indicative of infertility. So do you think that gets discussed in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition article? No. And what do they do instead? It goes on and on and on, engaging in speculation about how the longer menstrual cycles over a lifetime in a soy-eating woman will result in lower lifetime levels of estrogen, and that in turn will lead to reduced cancer risk. Does this seem like scientifically sound to you, or is this just a lot of theory and speculation? Well, in fact, there's plenty of evidence that soy can increase breast cancer risk. We know it increases cell proliferation. In fact, we have so much evidence that soy increases breast cancer that the Israelis, French, and Germans have all warned their citizens to exercise caution if a woman has either been diagnosed with breast cancer or has a family history of breast cancer. But the headlines here that soy prevents breast cancer. And every October they trot out this 1994 study as proof that soy actually prevents breast cancer. Comes out for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the soy industry is very active every October, and they're providing Vitasoy soy in pink containers that they give to all the runners at the Komen Race for the Cure events. And so it goes. Well, I found out something really interesting. When I was writing my book, The Whole Soy Story, I decided to get a hold of a copy of Adine Cassidy's original version of that article, because she first published it as her dissertation at Cambridge University in England, and that's what got her her PhD. Well, I look at that, and the data is in fact the same. They didn't monkey with the data, but the difference was in her dissertation, she has a major discussion of, guess what? Infertility issues. She goes on and on about the whole literature with animal studies linking soy to infertility, and this is a rich literature. And she concluded, quote, the plant estrogens present in soya protein interfered with mechanisms responsible for ovulation. Now, is that clear? I think it's clear. Fertility issues. So in 1991, she did an honest study and earned a well-deserved PhD from Cambridge. In 1994, she joined up with some soy industry scientists, including Dr. Kenneth Setchell, and that particular study got her fame and a very lucrative position at Unilever. Okay, what about our grown men? What does soy do to grown men who start drinking a lot of soy milk because they think it'll prevent heart disease or they think it's going to prevent cancer, whatever? What happens to these men? Well, male fertility issues, that's the biggest reason that the Israelis have warned against soy, because the Israelis care a whole lot about fertility. You know, we have that biblical injunction about be fruitful and multiply. The Israelis were very clear that they were concerned about adverse effects on fertility among the men. And what happens here? Soy can lower testosterone levels. And this can result in the poor quality and poor quantity of sperm. Recently, we had a study came out of Harvard School of Public Health, and they were looking at infertile couples, and they found to their total surprise that the men in these infertile couples, the men who were eating just 2 servings of soy foods a week, these weren't men who were eating it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, 2 servings a week. Those men had 41 million fewer sperm per milliliter. 41 million fewer. So how did the soy industry respond to this? They said, of course, it was a poor study, poorly designed, etc., which is pretty much standard reply on their part. And they also pointed out that you actually only need one sperm for conception. Well, I've got some better material here. Anybody interested in soy's effect on the libido? Well, soy is extremely popular in some places in Asia. It's popular in the Zen monasteries. And the reason it's popular there is because the monks take vows of celibacy, and those monks noticed that when tofu consumption went up, the naughty behavior went down. And people often ask me if soy is good for anything. Well, there's a lot of women here. Here's an idea that you might use on the man in your life, possibly. We know that Japanese wives feed extra helpings of soy to unfaithful husbands. And I'm going to propose that soy is very good for politicians, especially the ones with the zipper problem. Now, when I was getting endorsements for my book, I wasn't satisfied with just getting Dr. McCulley and Dr. McCullough and all these other fabulous scientists. I wanted to get Bill Clinton. And I pictured Bill saying, if that woman and I had eaten soy, we would have saved a lot of embarrassment to my presidency. Okay. Let's move on to that last window of opportunity, menopause for women. The soy industry has been extremely successful in promoting the idea that soy is the solution, the all-natural, safe solution to menopause. And they've been so successful at that that just about every midlife woman we know is swigging soy milk and eating soy foods and eating soy energy bars and bags of edamame like popcorn, because they think it's going to help with their hot flashes and other menopausal symptoms. And sometimes it may work, sometimes it does not. But we do, in terms of the science, we have the U.S. Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. In the year 2006, they published a great big long report indicating that regarding the studies of soy and menopause, the results were inconsistent, contradictory, of poor design, and too short duration. And that's something we see all the time, too short duration. That's how the soy industry gets a whole lot of studies that seem to be good, because they caught them short before the bad effects start to show up. Now, when you tell this to women, many of them will say to me, they'll respond that, well, it's worth a try because soy is all natural and maybe it's not going to work, but at least it's safe and they might as well give it a try. And what I'm going to say to you is there's plenty of reasons why it's not safe. And the biggest side effect that happens and that shows up fairly soon in these women who start consuming a lot of soy is thyroid problems. And midlife women are already at risk for thyroid problems, most often showing up as hypothyroidism with its familiar symptoms of weight gain, fatigue, lethargy, malaise, and many, many other health problems. Now, sometimes soy initially stimulates the thyroid, making the woman feel better. And that's the principal reason why many of the thyroid studies that the soy industry has put out show that women initially benefit. So they stop the study while the woman is still benefiting, and before that stressed out thyroid moves into long-term hypothyroidism and other problems. America's most famous midlife woman is probably Oprah Winfrey, and Oprah announced on Good Morning America that she had, quote, blown out her thyroid. Well, I have seen Oprah on her show go and talk about how much she loves her soy shakes made with soy milk and blueberries. And Oprah's personal physician is Dr. Christian Northrup, and Dr. Northrup has done wonderful work in body, mind, spirit medicine. But she's also a proponent of soy, and she has been a flack for a product called Revival, which has extremely high levels of the soy estrogens. And I don't think it's an accident that Dr. Christian Northrup herself has been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So one final thing about the risks. There was a study that came out in Honolulu, and it indicated that just 2 servings of tofu a week could lead to cognitive decline. So what does soy have to do with that? Well, they found accelerated brain aging, senile dementia, brain atrophy. And these weren't even people who were eating lots of soy. This study was a really good study with a lot of people. They did cognitive testing on 3,734 men and 502 of their wives. They did magnetic resonance imagery on 574 people, and they did autopsies on 290. And you could actually make a movie on that. You could call it Tofu and the Incredible Shrinking Brain, because those autopsies showed shrunken brains. They also reported that the people not only acted stupider and had poorer memory, etc., but that they looked older. So what did the soy industry say about this? Well, they have 2 answers to any study. If it's an old study, they say it's out of date. If it's a recent enough study, they say it's poorly designed. And this one was recent, so they said it was poorly designed. But in fact, this study has earned extremely high marks from scientists who are not soy industry paid people. And some of those scientists are at the FDA's Laboratory for Toxicological Research in Jefferson, Arkansas. And I want to point out that the FDA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they have some of the top scientists in the world working for them. The problem is those agencies don't listen to their own scientists. They have brilliant scientists. They've done research that is amazing, and in the case of soy, indicating the problems. And those scientists thought that the study was robust levels of data, statistically significant, everything was taken into account. These were good studies. So how did the soy industry act? Because as you can bet, this was really bad news for them. Soy prevents brain atrophy. That's not the kind of news the soy industry wants getting out. Well, what they do whenever some big study comes out, like this Harvard School of Public Health study about fertility, is they immediately get to work doing some short-term studies that will get the result they want, and then a few months later they announce with great fanfare that soy prevents cognitive decline, that we should eat a lot of soy to improve our memory or whatever it is. And they have a huge public relations machine. They have advertisements in just about every publication you can imagine, and that news, basically they overshadow the bad news with basically blasting out a whole lot of their good news. Okay, so in the last few minutes I've got, I want to answer some of the questions which come up all the time before I open it up to questioning. The first thing is, are there any safe soy products? Old-fashioned fermented soy products like miso, natto, tempeh, those are perfectly fine. Generally, they are eaten in moderation anyway. The fermenting process removes some of the anti-nutrients, not everything, and it doesn't remove the estrogens, but they're generally eaten in small quantities. I enjoy miso soup. I feel happy giving it to my children. We're talking small quantities. The real risks are the modern products like soy milk, and soy milk is not the worst thing out there, but some people drink a lot of it. The other thing is the additives in soy milk are very bad for your health. They include things like poor qualities of calcium, vitamin D2, and what we need is D3, and a lot of sugar, because without a lot of sugar in these products, Americans won't buy them because they taste pretty terrible. And the worst products are the ones that came in after World War II, things like the textured vegetable protein, soy protein, isolate soy protein, concentrate hydrolyzed plant protein. These are all things that are made with high temperatures, high pressures, chemical solvents, and they include damaged proteins. They include MSG as part of the processing. A lot of health problems with those. So even if you want to eat some of these old-fashioned soy products, be absolutely sure to avoid the modern products. And then people ask me, how much soy is safe to eat? Well, that really is going to vary. The Israeli Health Ministry has warned that babies should never get soy formula, that's never, and children should have soy foods or soy milk no more than once a day and no more than 3 times per week. Now that seems to me the outer limits of it. I'd recommend less for children. Now with the rest of us, if you've got a thyroid problem, probably should be avoiding soy. If you're allergic to it, of course you should avoid it completely. And if you're going to be part of Jeffrey Smith's campaign here, I think we absolutely must avoid any product containing genetically modified soy. And also, if you're a woman who's trying to become pregnant, avoid the soy, and have your partner avoid the soy. So we need to look at the whole picture. For a healthy person, if you occasionally get a little soy here and there, it's not a problem. But when you understand the genetically modified issue, that does become a larger problem, because soy is in every packaged and processed food. More than 60% of what you find in the supermarkets and the health food stores. It's in things like Bumblebee canned tuna, folks. It's all over. It's in your breads. It's in the fast foods. It's in about 100% of the fast foods. So the way to be free from soy, freedom from soy, is we do have to get back to real food, whole food, and slow food. And the way to become free from soy is also the way to become free from the genetically modified organisms. So this is something we can do and something we absolutely must do. And the other question I get all the time from people is they say, I eat organic soy. Aren't all the problems that you're talking about from genetically modified soy? And unfortunately, it's not true. The problems with soy are in all soybeans, but the genetically modified ones are infinitely worse. So do we have any other questions? Question is about soy and babe prisoners. That's a very good question. Soy is very heavily in the prisoner diet, and that's because it's very cheap, and we've got some lawsuits going on in Illinois specifically having to do with that. The prisoner diet is extremely heavy in soy. But getting back to where some of the origin of that problem is, a baby on soy formula in the first 6 months of life will have 50 to 80 times the manganese that we find in dairy formula or breast milk, and that can lead to damaged neurological and brain development, which can lead to attention deficit disorder, which can lead to violent tendencies, and that in turn can lead to crime. And that's why the state of California is considering making soy infant formula available only by prescription during the first 6 months of life. Thank you.